He was just a quiet mechanic in a forgotten town, until one little girl with a broken bike rolled into his life and changed everything. What started as a simple repair turned into a life lesson that even the most powerful CEO couldn't ignore. But when Jake discovered who her mother truly was, the moment threatened to undo everything he had built with his own hands and heart. Would he walk away, or choose the connection that had already changed him forever? If this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Comment below where you're watching from, and make sure you stay with us until the very end. The sun was just beginning to stretch over the rooftops of Maple Ridge, casting a sleepy orange glow across the sidewalks. It was the kind of town where everybody knew the names of the dogs before they knew the names of their neighbors, and the streets moved slower than the wind. In the heart of it stood a modest auto shop with peeling green paint and a wooden sign that read Jake's Garage. It had stood there for over 15 years, and for 15 years, Jake had worked alone. Jake was a quiet man with a beard the color of old snow and eyes that held more silence than sound. He fixed engines, patched tires, and replaced oil with the same patience most people reserved for prayer. People in town liked him but kept their distance. Jake was kind, no doubt, but he had the look of someone who had lost more than he let on that morning. As he adjusted a rusted muffler beneath a blue pickup, the shop bell rang. He didn't look up at first. Most folks came in for quick repairs or small talk they thought he needed. But this time, the voice was not a man's or a woman's. It was small, soft, and full of life. "Excuse me, sir, my bike, ... It won't move anymore." Jake slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a red rag. Standing in the doorway was a little girl, no older than 9, with wild curls tied back in 2 uneven ponytails. Her jeans were smudged with dirt, and one sneaker was untied. Beside her stood a pink bicycle with a crooked wheel and a chain hanging loose like a fallen necklace. Jake blinked. Children were rare visitors at his shop. He nodded once and motioned her forward. "Bring it here." She pushed the bike carefully across the grease-stained floor. It squeaked and wobbled like an old cart, but she handled it like it was precious. "What happened to it?" Jake asked. "I was trying to race a squirrel," she answered honestly. "I think I hit a rock, or maybe the rock hit me." Jake couldn't help the smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth. He knelt beside the bike, running his fingers along the bent spokes. "What's your name?" "Lily," she said, grinning. "What's yours?" "Jake. Just Jake. Just Jake." She seemed satisfied with that. As Jake began working on the chain, Lily crouched beside him, watching intently. Most kids would have wandered off, or started tapping things they shouldn't, but Lily stayed focused. "What's that tool called?" she asked, pointing to the pliers needle nose. "Pliers and that one. Adjustable wrench." She repeated the words under her breath, like she was tucking them into her memory. Jake worked in silence for a while, but Lily filled the gaps effortlessly. "My mum says I should never talk to strangers, but you don't seem scary." "Shouldn't believe everything people say," he replied quietly. "My mum's really busy. She works in a tall building and wears black shoes that click when she walks. I like coming here better." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You've never been here before." "I know, but I like it already." He didn't say anything to that, but something warm pressed against his chest. After about an hour of tightening, bending, and oiling, the bike stood upright again, its wheels spinning smoothly and its chain in place. "There," he said, stepping back. Lily clapped her hands, eyes wide. "You're a magician." Jake shook his head. "Just a mechanic." "Same thing," she said with a shrug. She took the handlebars and began to walk the bike toward the door. Then she stopped and turned. "Can I come back tomorrow? I want to learn how to do that." Jake hesitated. He had no children, no family nearby, no reason to say yes. But the hope in her eyes reminded him of someone he once knew, someone long gone. "Tomorrow," he said softly. Lily beamed and skipped out the door, her bike rattling slightly less than before. Jake watched her go, a strange sense of purpose blooming quietly inside him. He had spent so many years repairing things made of metal. Now, perhaps, he was fixing something else. Across the street, parked behind tinted glass, a sleek black car sat unnoticed. Inside, Evelyn Carter watched the exchange with folded arms. Her face was unreadable, her expression caught between curiosity and concern. She had not planned to stop, she had only wanted to confirm her daughter's location. But as she watched, Jake handed Lily a small blue cloth to wipe her greasy fingers. Something inside her shifted. She turned the key in the ignition but didn't drive away. The following morning arrived with a soft breeze and the scent of blooming jasmine drifting through the alley behind Jake's garage. Birds chirped like they were sharing secrets, and the hum of distant traffic felt more like a whisper than a roar. Jake opened his shop early, as he always did, but for the first time in a long while. He was waiting for someone. By the time the clock struck 9, the bell above the door jingled again. Lily burst in, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and her curly hair frizzier than the day before. Her cheeks were flushed with energy, and her bike rolled smoothly behind her like a proud companion. "Morning, Mr. Jake," she chirped, as if they had known each other forever. Jake gave a short nod, his face still unreadable but his eyes softer than usual. "You're early. I couldn't sleep. I told my mom I was going to the library." She said okay, but she didn't even look up from her laptop. Lily dropped her backpack onto the floor with a thud. "I brought snacks." She held up a plastic bag with 2 sandwiches wrapped in napkins, one of them clearly crushed. Jake raised an eyebrow. "You plan on staying long? I was thinking all day." She grinned. "If that's okay." He said nothing for a moment, then turned toward the workbench. "All right, but if you're going to be here, you're going to help. I want to." Jake handed her a cloth and pointed toward a dusty stack of tire rims in the corner. "Start by cleaning those." Lily got to work with such determination that it made Jake pause. She was young, but there was something heavy about the way she moved, like she was trying to prove herself to someone. He turned back to his own work, but he couldn't help glancing at her every few minutes. She hummed while she scrubbed, occasionally pausing to ask about different tools or parts. Her curiosity was relentless, but Jake never once lost his patience. By midday, grease streaked her cheeks, and her shirt had developed a permanent smudge across the front. Jake handed her a bottle of water and one of the sandwiches. "This one's less flattened," he said dryly. Lily giggled and took it. They sat on overturned buckets, eating in quiet comfort. "Why do you work alone?" she asked after a few bites. Jake chewed slowly. "Never needed anyone else. I think people need people," she replied without hesitation. Jake didn't respond, but her words lingered like the smell of oil on denim. "My dad used to fix things," Lily said, her voice quieter now. "Before he... well, before he left." Jake looked at her, but she kept her eyes on her sandwich. "He used to tell me that everything broken can be fixed. Even people." Jake's jaw tightened slightly. "Not everything." Lily blinked at him. "Why not?" he sighed. "Some things just stay broken." She nodded slowly, as if storing that answer in a box she might reopen one day. They spent the afternoon tinkering with an old scooter someone had abandoned behind the shop. Jake showed her how to check the bolts, clean the spark plug, and balance the wheels. She listened with the wide-eyed focus of someone building a future, even if she did not know what it looked like yet. By the time the sun began to dip low, Lily's hands were black with grime, and her laughter had become a steady sound in the workshop. "I like it here," she said, leaning against the scooter. "It's quiet, but not empty." Jake looked at her thoughtfully. "You're welcome anytime." That night, after Lily rode away and the garage lights dimmed, Jake sat at his workbench and stared at a worn photograph of a younger version of himself standing beside an old man with the same eyes. His father, the man who taught him to hold a wrench before he could write his name. He had not thought about him in years. The next day, and the one after that, Lily came again. Each morning brought new questions, and each evening she left with a little more knowledge than before. They repaired more bikes, cleaned rust from old handlebars, and even painted a broken scooter bright blue. But across the street, the same black car appeared every afternoon. Evelyn Carter watched silently from the driver's seat, never stepping out, never revealing herself. Her tailored suits and perfectly pinned hair made her stand out even while hidden. She was used to controlling empires, commanding boardrooms, and giving orders that shaped industries. But nothing had prepared her for the quiet power Jake had over her daughter's joy. Evelyn remembered Jake. Not clearly, but enough. They had crossed paths as teenagers at a town fair. He had fixed her brother's bike when it broke during a race. She remembered his hands covered in grease and his face flushed from the sun. He had been kind then too. She never imagined her daughter would be drawn to someone like him, yet here they were. One afternoon, Evelyn rolled down her window and listened. Through the open garage, she could hear Jake's low voice explaining the difference between a bolt and a screw. Lily laughed, correcting him with playful confidence. "Are you ever going to introduce yourself?" asked a voice from her Bluetooth speaker. It was her assistant, speaking from the office. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. "Not yet," she finally said. "I need to see more of him or of her, of both." That night, Jake found a letter in his mailbox. It was typed on heavy paper and sealed with a silver emblem. The letterhead read Carter Technologies. The message was brief. You are invited to present your project proposal at our private innovation gathering this Friday. Selected individuals may receive full support and partnership offers. We believe your work deserves greater attention. Jake read the letter 3 times. He had never submitted any application, never contacted anyone, never asked for attention. He placed the letter down, eyes narrowed, heart cautious. Something was shifting, and he could feel it in the air. Friday arrived with the weight of something unspoken. The sky was blanketed in soft gray clouds, and the breeze that rustled through Maple Ridge felt heavier than usual. Jake stood in his garage, the invitation from Carter Technologies resting on the workbench like a question he could not yet answer. He stared at it as if it might explain itself. For years he had kept his head low, working without fuss, avoiding attention. But deep inside a locked drawer, beneath old sketches and faded receipts, were blueprints, ideas, plans, dreams he had tucked away when life became too hard and too lonely. The kind of dreams only the very brave or the very desperate try to chase. He ran his fingers along the edge of the letter once more, then folded it into his jacket pocket. Lily arrived just after 10, her curls more tangled than usual and her backpack bouncing behind her. She seemed brighter than ever, unaware of the shift in Jake's mood. "Guess what?" she called out before he could say a word. "I fixed the brakes on my bike all by myself last night. Well, almost. I think I made them worse, but still, I tried." Jake smiled slightly. Trying is the first step. Lily noticed the paper sticking out from his pocket and tilted her head. "What's that?" "Just something from a company downtown. Are they giving you an award?" Jake chuckled. "Not exactly." She shrugged and pulled a rag from the shelf, already heading toward the workbench. It had become her favorite spot, and he had long since cleared a small drawer just for her tools. He never said so aloud, but her presence had changed the rhythm of his days in a way he had come to depend on. But across the street, as always, the black car returned. Evelyn Carter sat in the driver's seat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. The woman who could silence a conference room with a glance now sat in silence herself, watching a man who had no idea who she was. She had spent years building walls around herself, layers of professionalism, status, and control. Yet every time she saw Jake hand Lily a wrench, every time she heard her daughter laugh with her mouth wide open, something in her cracked. She had made herself a stranger to her own child, and Jake, unknowingly, had become the bridge between them. The memory came back sharply that morning, the town fair when she had been 17. Her younger brother, Thomas, had tripped over a rock and destroyed the chain on his brand new bicycle. They had been stranded until Jake appeared. Back then, he was just a quiet boy with strong hands and shy eyes. He fixed the bike without asking for anything and walked away before she could even say thank you. She never forgot that. And now, decades later, he was teaching her daughter the same quiet generosity. Evelyn stepped out of the car. It was the first time she had crossed the street since Lily had started coming to the garage. Jake looked up as the bell above the door rang and stood frozen for a moment. She was tall, poised, dressed in a crisp black suit with her dark hair pinned back. Her presence felt like winter stepping into spring. "Good morning," she said, her voice even. Jake wiped his hands. "Can I help you? I'm Lily's mother." He glanced toward the back, where Lily sat hunched over a dusty toolbox, humming to herself. "I figured. She didn't tell you my name. She said you work in a tall building and your shoes click." Evelyn almost smiled. "Almost. I wanted to thank you," she said, "for spending time with her." Jake looked away. "She showed up on her own. I just didn't send her away." Evelyn took a careful step forward. "She's different since coming here. Happier, more confident." Jake said nothing. "I know who you are," Evelyn continued. Jake met her eyes now, surprised. "I remember you," she said. "From years ago, you fixed my brother's bike when we were teenagers." Jake nodded slowly. "I remember that day. You had a red scarf." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. Jake looked back at the letter on the bench. "You're the CEO." "Yes, and this invitation. You sent it." She nodded. "I did. I've been watching, not because I don't trust you, but because I wanted to understand why my daughter smiles again." There was a long silence between them. Jake's voice was quiet when he spoke next. "You didn't have to hide. I didn't know how to step in," she admitted. "I've spent so many years building things I could control, but this watching someone else become the person my daughter runs to, it scared me." Jake leaned against the counter. His shoulders were broad, but his voice held no anger. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I know," she said. Evelyn turned to leave, but paused at the door. She needs someone who sees her, not just someone who provides for her. Jake glanced toward the back again. where Lily was now balancing a screwdriver on her palm. "Sees me too," he said. Evelyn gave a slow nod. "I'll be at the event tonight. I hope you'll present your project." After she left, Jake stood still for a long time. Later that evening, he dusted off the blueprints from the drawer. Pages and pages of ideas. A community workshop for kids. Free bike repair training. After-school mentorship. He had designed it all long ago when his brother died and left behind 2 sons Jake was too broken to raise. The idea had faded with time, buried under routine and regret. But Lily had brought it back to life. That night, Jake stood outside a towering glass building downtown. His boots were worn, his jacket faded, and he held a folder of blueprints tucked under one arm. The receptionist looked at him with mild confusion, but his name was on the list. Inside the room, polished people mingled with champagne glasses in hand. Jake stood apart, watching them, wondering if he belonged. Then a voice called his name. Evelyn approached, not in her usual suit, but in a soft blue dress. Lily stood beside her, glowing with pride. "You came," Evelyn said. Jake nodded. "Once, are you ready?" she asked. "I am now." Lily ran to his side and grabbed his hand. "Tell them everything, Mr. Jake. Don't forget the part about the scooter." He laughed, more freely than he had in years, and then he stepped forward, not to pitch a dream, but to share something already real. The room was quiet now. Jake stood before a long oak table beneath a ring of glowing lights. Around him sat people in sleek suits, their pens ready, their eyes measuring. He had no slides, no rehearsed speech, no expensive tie around his collar. What he held was a thick folder filled with grease-smudged sketches and handwritten notes. The kind of proposal that had never seen a boardroom before. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. To everyone else, she was just the CEO. But Jake knew she was more than that. She was a mother who had once loved a little girl so fiercely that she forgot how to slow down long enough to be near her. He saw that now. Under the layers of formality, something human flickered. Jake cleared his throat and placed the folder down. "I'm not a businessman," he began, his voice calm and steady. "I don't know how to talk in charts or percentages. What I do know is how to fix what's broken. That's what this is about." He opened the folder and spread out a set of hand-drawn plans. "This is not just about bikes. This is about giving kids tools to rebuild more than chains and tires. It's about confidence. It's about trust. It's about showing them they can take something that doesn't work and make it better with their own hands." The room remained still. Jake took a breath and continued, not once looking at the fancy suits, but instead at Evelyn. "I started drawing these plans years ago. A workshop where kids could come after school. A place where they could learn real skills. A safe space. I never followed through because ... I didn't think anyone would care. I didn't think anyone would come." He paused, his eyes softening. Then a little girl with curly hair walked into my shop with a broken bike. There was a flicker of movement as a few heads turned toward Evelyn. She sat still, eyes fixed on him. "Her name is Lily," Jake said. "She wanted to learn, not just how to fix a bike, but how to understand the world. She reminded me what it feels like to matter to someone." He leaned forward. "I didn't come here tonight for money. I came because she believed in me, and I think I finally believe in me too." The silence was heavy, but it was not empty. Someone near the far end of the table spoke up. "What would you need to get started?" Jake blinked. He had not expected that question. "Space," he said. "Tools, maybe a few volunteers, and time." Another voice followed. "How many kids do you think you could serve in a year?" Jake looked down at the drawings. "As many as show up." Evelyn finally stood. The room quieted further. All eyes turned to her. "I've watched this man for weeks," she began. "Not as a CEO, as a mother. My daughter came home covered in grease and joy. She found something I could never give her. Time, patience, a mentor who didn't care what car I drove or what title I carried." Her gaze swept across the room. "Jake has already changed one life. That's more than most of us can say about our meetings. I support this project fully." Whispers rippled across the room like soft rain. Jake felt his hands tremble slightly. The evening ended. Several board members approached him, offering ideas, shaking his hand, and handing him business cards he could barely read. Lily sat proudly on the edge of the stage, swinging her legs. "You were amazing," she whispered when he knelt beside her. He chuckled. "I was terrified. You didn't look it." He glanced across the room where Evelyn stood near the window, her face finally relaxed. The city lights blinked behind her like distant stars. Jake turned back to Lily. He said quietly. "You changed more than just your bike." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You changed me," she smiled, a little unsure. but her hand reached out to hold his without words. Later that night, as Jake walked the quiet streets back toward the edge of town, he stopped at the garage. He stood outside the door, looking at the chipped paint and old sign. It was no longer just a place of repair. It was a beginning. Behind him, footsteps echoed on the sidewalk. He turned to see Evelyn approaching, her shoes clicking against the pavement. "I wanted to say something," she said as she reached him. He nodded, waiting. "I was wrong," she admitted, "about a lot of things. I thought being successful meant being distant. I thought I had to choose between building something great and being present for my daughter." Jake looked at her gently. "You still have time to choose both." She blinked away the gloss in her eyes. "I don't know if I deserve a second chance with her. Maybe it's not about what you deserve. Maybe it's about what you do with the chance you've got." Evelyn looked toward the garage. "Will you let me help?" she asked. Jake smiled. "This place could use some new paint." She laughed softly, the sound real and unguarded. Then they stood together in the night. Two people learning that even broken things could be made whole again if someone was willing to try. And just inside the garage, leaning against the wall, Lily's pink bike stood proudly in the corner, clean, repaired, and ready for the road ahead. The sun rose slowly over Maple Ridge, casting a soft golden light across the rooftops and trees. A gentle breeze carried the smell of engine oil and fresh paint through the alley where Jake's garage stood, not quite the same as before. Faded green walls had been repainted a warm shade of blue. The sign above the door no longer read Jake's garage. It now said something more hopeful. Lily's workshop in thick white letters carved by hand. Inside, everything had changed. Rows of organized tools lined the walls. Wooden shelves held helmets, gloves, and donated bicycle parts sorted by size and color. A large bulletin board displayed children's drawings, some of them clumsy depictions of bikes, wrenches, and a man with a short beard who always wore the same jacket. Beneath the drawings were schedules, workshops for after school, weekends for free repairs, and names of volunteers written in neat columns. And in the middle of it all stood Jake, a man who had once been content in solitude, now surrounded by voices, laughter, and a future that felt wide open. Lily dashed across the room, waving a screwdriver in the air. "Mr. Jake, I taught Alex how to change a tire." Jake turned, his hands dusty but steady. "Did he lose a finger?" Lily grinned. "Nope." "Then you did all right." Children buzzed around them, busy in every corner of the workshop. Some worked in pairs, others focused quietly, wiping down tools or testing brakes. A sense of pride filled the space like sunlight but everywhere. At the back of the room, Evelyn stood by the large whiteboard, updating a list of new supply requests. She was dressed in jeans and sneakers, her blazer draped over a chair. Her phone rested, untouched, beside her. Every Friday, she left the skyscrapers behind to spend the day here. At first, she had come with hesitation. Now, she came early and stayed longer than planned. She had learned how to patch a tire, remove a pedal, and, more importantly, listen when her daughter spoke. Jake watched her from across the room. There was no need to say much between them anymore. Every action spoke louder than words. At noon, Lily stood on a small stool and rang a bell near the door. "Lunch break," she shouted. "And don't forget group ride this afternoon." Excited cheers filled the workshop. Bikes were parked, tools were placed back in drawers, and the kids raced outside where picnic blankets had already been laid out. Jake sat with Lily on the curb, sharing sandwiches like they had that first day. She took a bite and looked up at him. "Remember when my bike was a total disaster?" He nodded like it was yesterday. "It kind of started everything, huh?" Jake smiled. "It did." She leaned against him. "You fixed more than just the bike." He looked at her with something close to wonder. "You did too." Evelyn joined them, sitting down beside her daughter and passing them both water bottles. She looked tired, but not from stress. It was the kind of tired that came from doing something real, something that mattered. "Any more meetings this week?" Jake asked her quietly. "Only the important kind," she replied, glancing at Lily. After lunch, the children lined up with their helmets. The group ride was their weekly tradition, now a simple trail through town and back, where every child could show what they had built, repaired, and learned. Jake led the way with Lily riding beside him, her pink bike still shining from their first repair. Behind them followed 10 more kids, laughing and calling out to one another as they pedaled through the streets. The townspeople came out to wave. Some clapped, others took photos. It had become something beautiful to witness, a reminder that growth did not need to be loud to be powerful. They passed the park, the library, and finally returned to the shop where parents waited with smiles and questions. Jake helped unbuckle helmets and checked the bikes before each child left. When the last one was gone, he stood quietly at the doorway. Lily came and stood next to him. "You know what I want to do when I grow up?" she asked. "What's that?" "Run this place." Jake looked down at her, eyes filled with something deeper than pride. "Then it's yours," he said. She beamed. Inside, Evelyn sat at the desk, flipping through the new volunteer applications. She looked up as Jake and Lily entered, and for a moment they stood there together, not as mechanic, child, and CEO, but as something more, a family formed not by blood, but by kindness. Later that evening, as the sky turned soft with stars, Jake stepped outside and locked the door behind him. The street was quiet again, but he no longer felt alone. He walked home with grease still on his hands and peace in his heart. The gears in his life, once rusted and idle, now turned with purpose, and all it had taken was one little girl, a broken bike, and the courage to care. In the end, Jake didn't just fix a broken bike. He helped mend a bond between a mother and her daughter, and unknowingly opened the door to a new beginning for himself and his small town. What started as a quiet act of kindness grew into something far greater than he ever imagined. It was never about business deals or big opportunities. It was about showing up, caring without condition, and believing that even the smallest actions can change lives. Because sometimes, the true fix isn't what we do with our hands, but what we do with our hearts.